Hi, and welcome to this PowerShell tutorial video where we will be making the logging module. So we will be using our SQL module that we've made in a previous video, and I will also be going over again how to create a database and the table that I will be creating in order to use our logging module. So if you do create a database slightly more different than mine, you will have to accommodate the differences that you are creating in your database. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Also, if you guys missed the SQL module video, I will be putting a link in the description below. And also, I will be putting a link in the description down below for the SQL Express and SQL Server Manager video, as well as the first video for the SQL PowerShell video, where we go a little bit more into detail about creating a database and creating our table. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So we're going to go ahead and go into our SQL Management Studio here. So we are already connected to our our database server here. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on database, and we are going to click on new database here, and we are going to create our database called logging. We're going to click on OK here. Everything else stays the same. So we have our database called logging, and then we don't have any tables yet. So we're going to go ahead and right click on the logging database and click on new query. And I like to create the tables using just the SQL code and not through the GUI. I just find it a little bit easier to create tables to my liking. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a create table, and we're going to name that table log, and then we're going to do an open and close parentheses and semicolon at the end, and we're just going to put a bunch of enters here. So our first column, we're going to name it ID. We are going to assign it a variable type of big int, and then we are also going to assign it as an identity. So what this means is it means it's automatically going to label that column starting at 1, and it's going to increment by 1 every time, making it a primary key. So we're just going to put a comma here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do a occurred at, and we're going to set this to a date time. And then we're going to set this to a default value of current timestamp. Now what this is going to do is going to create a column with the name of occurred at, and every time that we insert into our database, the ID will already be pre-filled, but also the occurred at will already be pre-filled with the timestamp of when we are putting it in our database. So we don't have to pass in a time value. It will automatically be taken care of for us with the database. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a column called app name, and we're going to put this as an n varchar. So this is just a character field, and we're going to allow up to 100 characters here. And then we're also going to put a computer name field. And once again, we're just going to give it 100 characters for this. I believe in my previous video, I had put 255 characters. It's really up to you. Just be aware if you put 100 characters, you cannot put a computer name over 100 characters. But I think that 100 characters should be more than enough. You could probably even put less. And finally, our last column is going to be details. And we're going to put that as a text column, which is just holds, I believe it's 16 megabytes worth of text. So it gives us a lot of room to store data. And this is what's going to be storing for us our JSON of the details of the log. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to run this here. So we already have our logging database, and we have our table here, which is the log table. So let's go ahead and let's go back into our PowerShell window here. So we have our SQL module, which has our connections, our invoke select, our invoke insert, update, and delete. Now, the only things that we really need for a logging module is going to be reading and inserting, but we're also going to have to connect to the database. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to import that SQL module. So we are going to do an import module, and I'm just going to go get my module right now. So that is going to be it here. And once again, we're always going to want to use the force this way. If there's any updates to the module, we want to make sure that we bring that in. If you leave that out and the module is already imported and you've made a change, it will not import that change. So that's the reason for the force. And once again, just a little reminder, if you guys haven't seen the SQL module video, I will be putting a link in the description for the first video for that. It is a 3-part series where you guys will be able to see that. And that kind of references my PowerShell SQL videos. So there might be a few videos to watch to fully understand this video if you haven't watched those videos already. So the first part that we really need to set up for our logging module is going to be the connection to the logging database. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function here called connect logging database. And the way that we're going to do this, we're going to do an open and close curly bracket. And we're going to do the typical commandlet binding and param. Now, for me, I don't want to have any parameters for this one. I'm going to have all of our connection details right in the function because I want everyone that uses this module to use the exact same details. Now, of course, if the person doesn't have access to the database, the way that I'm doing it now will not work because I'm using the integrated security, which is really the recommended method. But in reality, you'd probably be using this script with scripts that are automated with an account, which I've gone over the reasons why you'd want to do that. So if you have a user in your Active Directory that is allowed to access that database, using the integrated security is the best option. You don't have to write the password in the script, and then all your scripts will be using that account, accessing the database with that account as well. So I always try to use integrated security. Just make sure that the account running the script has access to the database. And you can always, of course, do some slight modifications to this to use a username and password via the module. And then this way the user doesn't have to put it in, but then again, you will have a username and password visible in your script, which is not super recommended. So we're going to have our typical try catch statement here. And the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to have a SQL con params. So this is the SQL connection parameters, and we're going to store this in a hash table. And we are going to do an instance name, database name, and then integrated security. So our integrated security is going to be true. Our database name is going to be called logging, and our instance name. Now this will be the name of the server that is holding your SQL Express instance. So for me, it's going to be hype v2016L, and then we're going to do a backslash, and SQL Express is the instance name. Now this you are going to find in your SQL Server Manager, which is going to be right here, just hype v2016 SQL Express. This is where my database is held. That is the instance name. So this is the server name. This is the instance name. So this is how we break that down. Now, once we have those connection parameters, what I want to do is I want to create a variable called SQL connection, and we're going to do a connect SQL server with the SQL connection params, and we are going to go ahead and return the SQL connection. And in our catch, like always, we are going to do the right error $_ dot exception dot message. So this is going to be our connect to the logging database. Now, what we also need to do is we also need to have an ability to close the connection because we do not want to leave open connections. So we're going to do a close logging database. Again, open, close curly brackets. And we're going to put our commandlet binding here. And then param. Now this one is going to have a parameter because we do need to pass in that connection object for it to close. So we're going to do a parameter mandatory, and we are going to take in our connection here. And then what we're going to do is we are going to do a, as you probably have guessed it, a try, and then a catch. And then once again, our default catch is always the same. So let's just put that in here. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a close SQL Server connection, and we're going to close our incoming connection object. So now we have the ability to connect and close our connection. So let's just see if this works. So let's go ahead and let's save this here. And I'm going to save this on my C drive, YouTube, and I'm going to save this to logging here. And I'm going to save this as logging. And like always, for a PowerShell module, we have to save this as a PSM1. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new script here. And we are going to import that module. So let's do import module, C, YouTube, logging.psm1, and then we're going to do the force. So let's import that here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do our connect logging database. As you see, we don't have any parameters because all we need to do is just run this. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a variable called log connection equals connect logging database. So this will open up our connection to the logging database. And then if we look at the log connection object here, we will see that it is open. We are connected via integrated security to the logging database on the data source Hype-V 2016 SQL Express. So then all we need to do here is close logging database connection, log connection. And once we run that, and if we look at it again, we will see that the connection is closed. So our logging module so far is working, and it does have the dependency of that SQL module. So you're always going to want to make sure that you have the right position of your SQL module and then the right position for your logging module in here. So we're going to want to go back into the logging module. And what we're going to want to do now is we want to create our two main functions. So our two main functions, like I've mentioned earlier, is going to be adding to the log and reading from the log. So let's go ahead and let's create the function to read from the log first, and then we will do the adding to the log. So let's create a function here. And let's go ahead and do a read, or let's do a get get log. Yeah, we're just going to do a get dash log, open and close curly brackets. We're going to do a commandlet binding here. Now for this one, we do need a parameter because we do need to pass in our connection to the logging database. So we're going to have parameter mandatory. We're going to have our connection. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a try catch. And again, our default write error command here. And then in our try, we are going to do a $results equals invoke SQL select. Then our connection, we're going to pass in our connection object. And then our select statement is actually going to be something that we're going to be hard coding in here. We're going to do select star from log. And then what we're going to add is order by ID. And this is just going to make sure that all the log events come in ordered by their ID number. Sometimes you'll see if you just do a select star from log, they might not be ordered by their ID number. So I just like to add that in there just to really solidify that. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to return results. Now, right now, if I do this here, so I just have to open my connection again. Now, if I do a get log connection and log connection, it will not give me an error, but I will not be getting anything back because I just recreated that database. I don't have any items in there. So let's go ahead and let's create that add function. So we're going to go back into our logging module and we're going to go ahead and create a function called add log, open and close curly parentheses or curly brackets. We're going to do a command let binding. And then we're going to do a param. Now this one is going to be a little bit more in depth for the parameters because as we know, for our insert statement here, our insert does only take an insert statement. But this is for the logging module and we already know that we're going to be inserting directly into that log table. So what we want to give people is we just want to give the ability to people to give us the app name, the computer name, and the details, and we will be taking care of the rest. So what we want to first do here is we want to make our first parameter, our parameter that we always create, which is the connection parameter, and that is going to be mandatory. And then we have to make a few more mandatory parameters here. So let's do a parameter and we are going to call it, well, first we have to make it mandatory. And then it's going to be a string, and we're going to call this app name. And let me just copy paste this line here so we can go a little bit faster. Our second one is going to be computer name. And our last one is not going to be a string. We are going to be taking in an object, and we're going to call this details. So we have our 3 columns that we can take in. Now again, this is where yours might be slightly different. If you've made your logging table a little bit different because you have different needs, then by all means, just change the parameters here to make it work for what you have. The reason why I do it just a detailed text is because I will be putting my objects, as you will see, I will be converting them into JSON, and this just makes it a lot simpler to store the data in just one simple column. And it really doesn't matter at that point what script is inserting into the log. The details could be different for each application. I don't really have to worry about it because the details in itself is going to be a JSON object. I don't have to worry about like, oh, in this script, this column doesn't really make sense. So it's going to be null. Or a whole bunch of other stuff. So what I like to do is I like just to take in the app name and the computer name that is running that script, and then the details will have everything else that I really need. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a try catch here again, and we're going to do our simple again, write error, $_, .exception.message. And in our try statement here, we are going to do an insert command is equal, and we're going to do some double quotes. We're going to do insert into log. Now we have to put our 3 column names, so app name, computer name, and then details, and then values. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So what we need to do is we need to do some single quotes. So what I like to do is I like to do single quotes, comma, single quotes, comma, single quotes, because we have 3 values that we're inserting. And then in here, I like to wrap them in $ parentheses here. So these are just like variable wrappers. In the first one, which takes in the app name, we're going to do app name. Second one, we're going to do computer name. And the last one, which is a little bit more complicated, but still pretty simple, we're going to do details, and we're going to pipe that to convert to JSON. So this is going to convert our details object into JSON and insert it into the database. And then all we are going to want to do is we're going to do a invoke SQL insert connection. We're going to pass in our connection object. And then our insert statement, we are going to pass in our insert command. So that should be good here. So let's save that. And let's import our module here once again. Now our log connection should still be open from before. And it is. So now let's go ahead and let's add some stuff into our log. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a add log connection. We're going to do our log connection. Our app name, we are going to do a logging module test. Computer name, what I like to do is I actually like to just pass our environment variable, which is just $n colon computer name. And then for details, we're going to pass in a log entry. Now we're going to have to create this object here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a log entry equals new object type name is going to be a PS object. We're going to do a add member. Input object is going to be log entry. Member type is going to be a note property. Name is going to be, let's do user. And then value is going to be test user1. Add member input object. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a log entry very similarly to my script that automates groups for us. So we're going to get the user and the group here that got modified. So add member input object log entry. Oops. And member type, note property, name, and then we're going to do action, value, user added to group. Now this is just a very, very dummy log entry. We're going to be seeing in the next video, I'm actually going to be integrating this logging module into a script that we've done in the past. So I'm going to be taking our Active Directory automate groups script, where we do have logging, and the logging just kind of outputs to the screen right now. But we're going to be importing this logging module in there, and we are going to be storing everything into the database. So that's going to be super cool. And you guys are going to actually see it in like a real life example. But for now, let's go ahead and let's just run this add log here. We get nothing back, which is perfect. We don't get an error. And then if we get the log now, we can see here that we do get our entry that we just did, the logging module test. It is December 28th at 12:51 here. It just passed. The computer that inserted is going to be Hype-V 2016. And then we have our details. So what we would be able to do with this here, just to show you guys an example of what we would do with the get log. If we do log equals get log, now what I can do is I can do for each row in log. Now that we have our for each statement here, Now we can do row dot details convert from JSON, and we can do that. So we can get all of our objects here just like that. So it's super useful. Now what you could do is you could do a little bit more of a useful get log. Now the get log is really just for if you need to get something from the database, it might just be easier doing it this way, or you could do it all in your SQL statement. Really, the log is just there to store all the data in. If something goes wrong, you can look up something for that day, for that time, for that specific script, and just go look at everything for it. So that is really the purpose for it. I'm going to go a little bit more into detail into that once we integrate it into a real script. So like I said, in the next video, we're going to be integrating this logging module into our automate groups script. So be sure to be lookout for that, and like, subscribe if you liked the video. Comment down below if you guys have any questions or anything like that. And be sure to hit that notification bell to be notified when the next video comes out, and I will see you guys on the next video.